Yes.
I'm Claire Lopez, former executive director of the Iran Policy Committee and currently with the Intelligence Summit Advisory Council. My question is for both panelists, or all three of you, if you wish. On a very practical level, as a Westerner, or especially an American, how is it best to approach Muslims and the Muslim world to support and encourage change, enlightenment, as Ibn Waraq put it, when there are two rather large impediments? One, the loss of legitimacy on the part of the West and Americans for support of human rights in the view of many in the Middle East. So our own loss of legitimacy. And then secondly, from the point of view of the Muslim world, by Muslims who wish to reform, associating themselves or being seen to associate themselves with Westerners who are hoping for the same thing, they themselves sometimes lose legitimacy. So two things there. How do we overcome our own loss of legitimacy in the world's eyes? And then secondly, how can Muslims who would wish to work for such an agenda overcome the impression among their own that they are giving out to the West or giving in?
Let me say that we begin here at this conference because we will make alliances of like-minded spirits to stand against the opposition, whether it's secular, Western, politically correct, or whether it's intolerant, jihadic opposition. So having said that,
that's a big question. Can you help somebody who doesn't realize that they need help? We were discussing what this conference could be. This conference could be some sort of intervention. But at the end of the day, a lot of these societies and cultures in the Middle East and in the Islamic world, at least to my reading, don't seem to realize that they need help. It's very convenient, these slogans that are bandied about, that that everybody pays lip service to, anti-West, anti-Christian, anti-democracy and liberalism. They're out to get us, colonialism, all these things. All right, and there is a soft sympathy or some sort of pride in what the jihadists are doing, giving the West a bloody nose. That's how it's peddled. All right, great. They're coming after you too. That's the point that gets missed by a lot of these societies, is that it's going to be very hard to live under what these people envision. This Islamic empire or this caliphate or the Sharia-based government. And until they do, it's going to be very hard to help anyone. I'll give an example of what's going on in western Iraq, Anbar province. Right now, there's a change. Why? Because Al-Qaeda, after establishing itself in Anbar province, they're going on to their next step, which is founding a state and imposing their vision. And to do that, they have to weed out the people who are not completely on board. Well, it turns out a lot of people are not completely on board. And then they start killing tribal sheikhs and killing even heads of people who are part of insurgent groups that are fighting the Americans. Killing them off, and there's blood and there are feuds, and right now a lot of these tribes in Anbar province are asking the central government for help and asking the Americans for help. Right now they have a problem. Al-Qaeda is their problem. This sort of the terrorism that they romanticize, all right, is leaning hard upon them now. I think the point that was just made is very relevant and accurate. This is just the beginning. This is just an appetizer in Iraq. This is going to happen across the Middle East. It's going to singe Europe, and societies will, and these governments that are also turning a blind eye to all of this, they're going to start asking for help, and only then can you offer it.
Just adding a short comment here. I totally agree with your view, and I would like to state that the problem of Islamism, it's exactly like cancer. If we don't fight it today and confront it today, it will confront us tomorrow, and it will be even bigger and more damaging to us. So it's one of the problems in the world that you have to deal with it, and you cannot escape from it because it's confronting you anyway. It's like you are running against a wall. Trying to imagine it does not exist does not make any change. It will hit you at the end. So when the question was what the West can do, there are many things could be done, but I will choose two important things. To help in giving the terrorists and the jihadists two forms of defeat: military defeat and mental defeat. When it comes to military defeat, I'll give you an example. After the war in Afghanistan and the humiliating appearance of Saddam Hussein in the war in Iraq, some of the top universities in the Islamic world started to change some violent concepts in Islam. And we have seen start of reformation only after the military defeat. It is a mentality and psychology that has to feel defeated in order to make change. It's like the emperor of Japan. Peace happened only when we defeated him. When he felt he was weak and defeated militarily, peace happened after it. The same in World War II with Hitler. Peace, negotiations, love and harmony didn't work. Military defeat worked to give the feeling that the ideology is weak. Because it's military, the Islamic ideology or Islamist ideology is based on a concept of power and arrogance and being superior to others. You give them, number one, the feel of military defeat to allow reformation to happen. Number two, the feel of... Number two, the feel of mental defeat, which is by allowing and encouraging heavy criticism of the Islamic theology. Because when Muslims feel that some people in the West are telling them there is no problem with Islamic teaching, all religion preach peace, and there is nothing wrong with the teaching, it's all poverty and lack of education, why then they will reform? If you told me that I don't have a disease, why I should take a medication? This is what's happening now in the world. Heavy criticism of Islamic ideology and theology and encouraging it is vital because it will put pressure on Muslims to say, oh, there is something wrong. Let us try to accept or adopt other forms of teaching. And by these two mechanisms, military defeat and ideological defeat, the reformation can happen and change can start. Yeah, thank you.
I agree with both panelists. The West will have to develop the will required to deliver a defeat, the likes of which we will hear of no jihad for another 1,000 years. But the West has not yet, certainly Europe hasn't, and America's media and intelligentsia and liberals and chattering classes don't want to admit that there is a jihad and that it's coming our way, and that if we don't really care about polygamy or the veiling or stoning to death of women over there, that it will come our way. So we need to also educate the West, which is very hard, to educate the West to then, one of the things in a very somber voice, let me say, when Ahmadinejad began talking openly, there's a lethal Jew hatred, there's a genocidal Jew hatred in Islamic literature that's through the internet and musical videos, and it's horrifying and very sophisticated. And when Ahmadinejad came right out and said nuclear genocidal will get rid of Israel, there was a silence in the West. There was a silence among Jewish American liberals, among Jewish groups in Europe, a dreadful silence. So from that moment on, I've been thinking a second Holocaust is very possible. Will Israel have to go it alone? Can Israel muster the military might to do so? Will America desert Israel? And actually, Israel is just the representative, the symbol for the West and for all the values that we hold dear, beginning with democracy and freedom and religious tolerance. So the West is now going to have to muster a resolve that so far I do not see. Okay. Sir.
Hi, my name is Brett Stevens. I'm with Wall Street Journal. Traditionally, the way in which the West has expanded, or Western values have expanded to other places, other cultures, is, well, in two forms. One is rising standards of living through free market, capitalist, free trading economies. And the other is the creed of the various Western freedoms of conscience, and so on. But it seems that Islam presents, in a sense, a special case, a special challenge, and I'm wondering if you can address it. And what I mean is this. Often where we see really radical and virulent forms of Islam coming into being isn't necessarily in places like Egypt or Jordan, but is often in Paris or Berlin, among Muslims who are comparatively much better off than they are in the Middle East, and who, although there are still barriers, still have a kind of access to Western values and Western standards of living, and yet consciously reject those. And there is a phenomenon which I equally could have put to the previous panel, of Muslims who are being subject, or who aren't simply being subjugated by certain interpretations of Islam or certain approaches to Islam, but who are in a sense choosing submission. And this is a kind Jean-Francois Revel talks about this in vis-a-vis the totalitarianism in the 1980s, people who actively seek submission in some way or another, and it's obviously a kind of psychological phenomenon. But that psychology seems to be prevalent throughout much of the Islamic world. Now, that might be a misimpression on my part, but I'm wondering if the panelists and anyone else could address the subject. The appeal among Muslims who have alternatives to nonetheless stick by a version of Islam that, to people like me, seems the most medieval.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will, but please.
No, go ahead, please.
After you.
So who will start? Yeah. Thank you for the question. Just a comment here about why Muslims in the West and in other parts of the world have such a desire, or how this appeal happened to this form of Islam, this violent form of Islam. Actually, the main issue here is that the Salafi Islamic teaching, which is the origin of Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia and probably the origin of this violent form of teaching, created the religion and the teaching as like a house of cards. Do you know the house of cards? If you get one, try to change one card or remove it or replace it by other card, it can collapse. So this is what many Muslims feel, because these basic violent things like killing the apostate, hating Jews, and beating women, all such things have been structured in the Islamic theology in a manner that Muslims feel that Islam itself will collapse without it. So they cannot imagine Islam without killing the apostate. They cannot imagine Islam that stand clearly against beating women or against slavery, because it is clear, it's part of the structure of the Salafi teaching. So the moment they feel that there is any change in any of these things, they feel that the whole religion is collapsing. So they become more anxious and more desirable to follow the religion. It's like someone in the ocean and catching a small piece of wood. And this was the only thing that keeping him surviving or feel he's surviving. And you try to take it and replace it with a better one. He will resist you. And this is what is happening now. They feel that the whole religion will collapse by changing these violent things because it is structured within the theology itself.
This has been pointed out before, but Islam is one of these few religions that, at the time of its founder, succeeded in a big way. To be a Muslim, to be an early Muslim, which is the early Islam that these Salafists want to go to, was to be part of a successful enterprise, a powerful enterprise. You're going out for booty, you're going out for conquest, you're going out for women, pillage, and people were afraid of you. You were respected, and you had purpose, and it was all sanctified and codified. And this is what we see as the vast bulk of what later became Sharia. So, in a sense, Islam is part of the hard wiring for Islam is empire, is a purpose beyond this relationship between man and God or any other form. And this empire is something that, with a few setbacks here and there, managed to have quite a go of it for many centuries. And, you know, whenever they'd have a little setback, there was always the expectation that there'll be a corrective course and that history would resume and Islam would be, again, triumphant. And you'd be part of this successful venture, expanding venture. 300 years ago, things started taking a slide downwards, and they haven't stopped. That's the Muslim concept. They started losing territory, and they always thought they can get it back, but they haven't. And there was always expectation, okay, next week we're going to reconquer Spain, bring it back into the fold, and yeah, the Vienna, all right, that's 3 weekends from now, that sort of thing, right? That hasn't happened. And then they experimented with all these new ideas that came from the West. And they tried sort of in a pure form or a hybrid forms of government, and it didn't work. I think my own interpretation of where this energy is coming from, and I'm not talking about the European case specifically, I'm talking more about the sense in the Middle East, is that going back to this pure form of Islam, that is the winning formula. That's what we need in order to recapture that moment of glory. It's like, if you can imagine, it's like a suit of armor that they've worn, but then they got adorned with silks and jewelry and and embroidered whatever scaffold, all these things, and they're heavy now. And these Salafists, their argument is that we need to take away all these trappings. We need to strip down the Muslim warrior to the basics, to the essentials, to the most simple armor, in order to recapture that vigor. And I think that's where a lot of this is coming from. The sense that Islam, or that first Islam, gave them a model for success, which they've been lacking for 300 years.
As a psychologist, let me say that the second and third generation Muslim immigrants in Europe, where there's been vast immigration and no real integration or assimilation, the younger Muslims and Christian converts to Islam as well, are looking for order. Some of the men are in jail, and they have very chaotic inner lives. Maybe they're mentally ill. They're losers, and they're looking for structure that promises both a political, a psychological, and a social and a military control and a discipline. So you have a lot of conversion in jails all over the United States and all through Europe among criminals. Then you have second and third generation Muslims in Europe who they either want their Che Guevara moment of romantic uprising, 1968, Revolution Fidel, or because there is real racism endemic in Europe, and they can't quite fit in, not because they're uneducated, not because they don't have a safety net, they do, but because these are not their roots. They don't belong here, and they don't really belong back in the countries of origin either. So they're going to forge a new identity by going back to the past, to the dream of the Spartan caliphate. So that's what we're seeing in the West among Muslims and converts to Islam.
My name is Bill Smith. I have a very, I think, a simple question, but it's a big one, I think, and that is, what would be the immediate consequences of an early American withdrawal from Iraq?
Thanks for the question. Again, my view is that immediate withdrawal from Iraq without proper preparation and without covering this with a very powerful psychological war to make the enemy feel defeated will bring catastrophes, not only to the United States, but to the whole world. I'll give you an example to show you how concession and withdrawal can bring more attacks. Number one, when the terrorists attacked the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998, the response of the administration back then was extremely weak. And this weak response, what brought September the 11th? This is the mentality of the jihadists. When you show weakness, I immediately think to attack you again. In fact, you see the cartoon issue of Prophet Muhammad. The cartoons were published on the 13th of September 2005. Till 13th of January 2006, there was no violent demonstrations for 4 months period. Violent demonstrations only erupted when the magazine apologized to them. It was on the 30th of January 2006, the magazine in Denmark apologized for publishing the cartoons. On the same day, in less than 24 hours, violent demonstrations erupted throughout the world. So withdrawal and showing weakness in this situation will just bring more catastrophes. You will certainly, at some stage, there should be some withdrawal. But to do it in a sudden, erratic manner and to show them that they are victorious will bring real catastrophes to all mankind. Because they will say that we defeated the United States of America by doing barbaric acts. Let us try to do this on their land. Let us try to do this in Europe. We will defeat any government, whatever power it has, by just being barbaric. So you are inviting barbarism by withdrawing from Iraq and showing that you are conceding or you are weak. If you withdraw from Iraq, you have to withdraw with honor. You have to withdraw while showing the enemy that they have been defeated. You have to withdraw while covering yourself properly with a very powerful psychological war to show the Islamists that they are the loser and they have been defeated. This is my view. Thanks.
Putting that question in terms of how it's relevant to the jihadist mind, I'd have to say that they have a very curious approach to solving problems. In some way, it's very rational. In many ways, it's irrational. Now, the rational approach to America being in Iraq, from the jihadist perspective, is that we're going to be a nuisance. We're going to be a military nuisance, all right, which will have a much larger media echo that will give the sense that things are not going well in Iraq for America. Now, the irrational part is that, you know, this is all being done according to a divine plan. They attacked on September 11th. They thought, you know, one blow, and then, you know, God will take care of the rest. He'll fill in the blanks, and everything will be victorious. Now, they saw what happened to the Taliban, how that was brought down, and you know, they sort of meandered into the jihad in Iraq. And now, this talk about withdrawal, they see as the result of their rational approach, and they also see as this sort of validation by the divine, that what they set out to do against incredible odds, and they know, and I think a lot of military people know, that they don't pose more than a nuisance militarily to the American military. But, however, there's a divine force that is pushing all this forward in order to give them this victory. They feel entitled to it. And, you know, that just feeds into their sense of mission and of their role in history. And it drives them further to go for even more ambitious plans, like the empire.
Dear friends, the hour is upon us. May I suggest that those left standing at the altar of truth... No. Come, I'm sure that the panelists will speak with you privately, so your question and its answer will not be lost. Let me thank the organizers of this splendid, landmark, historic conference, beginning with Austin Dacey and Banafsha Zanbanatsi, and the Center for Inquiry, and the wonderful, passionate, intelligent comments from our panelists here. We're not going away. Don't go away. See you soon.